In his State of the Nation address last month, President Duterte made a startling announcement. He proposed a shift to a semi-presidential form of government, one that has both a president and a prime minister. There are few who still remember a time when the Philippines also had both. What is this proposal for change, and what does it mean for us? Good evening, I'm Tony Abad, and this is Political Capital. We are honored to have with us tonight a real live Philippine Prime Minister, Prime Minister Cesar Virata. And joining him is Orion Perez, co-founder of the Correct Movement, which stands for the Constitutional Reform and Rectification for Economic Competitiveness and Transformation. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you for making time for Bloomberg TV. We have a real chance, a real window to change and redesign the system, so to speak. What we have here is a chance to talk to a real Prime Minister, somebody who's had that experience. I understand the first is Apolinario Mabini in the First Republic.
Although there is no provision in the Constitution about that.
I think he was just appointed, no, by by Aguinaldo. And then, of course, President Marcos had both.
Yes.
Technically speaking, he had...
In the beginning, it was both president, his last prime minister.
Yes. And then you became Prime Minister, sir. Now, sir, briefly, what is the experience of being Prime Minister? How would you describe it?
In the early 70s, the 1973 Constitution provided a parliamentary system very similar to that of the UK, of Great Britain, wherein the president is just a nominal head of state.
Yes.
And all the powers were with the Prime Minister. President Marcos created a body to review the provisions of the 1973 Constitution, whether they would like the President to be elected by Parliament, and there is unanimity in saying, no, the people would like to elect the president. In that case, we have to adopt more or less the French model, wherein de Gaulle said that the president must be elected directly, and there will be a parliament with a prime minister.
Orion, the President Duterte mentioned that he actually used the term French model.
Yeah.
The French model is not a parliamentary
Technically
model.
speaking, it's actually more of a semi-presidential system. In fact, some political scientists actually describe it to be more of a presidential system, not really a parliamentary system anymore. The French president is way too powerful for it to really be a parliamentary system.
So it was really a de Gaulle system.
Yes, yes.
I know there was a Fourth Republic, and then he decided that they should have a stronger president.
Yes, yes. What happened before, during the Third and the Fourth Republics in France, was that they had a pure parliamentary system.
Yes.
But it was a parliamentary system where they had too many parties. They had an electoral system that allowed so many small parties to emerge, and therefore they had fragile coalitions.
Okay.
And that was a little too chaotic. So when de Gaulle came because of the Algerian crisis, he then decided, why don't we follow what the U.S. has, which is they have a strong president. And that was coming after World War II. And World War II, the USA emerged as like everyone's model of what they wanted to become.
Do you think it was wise to have that sort of strong president together with the Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's the people's wish. And this is very similar to what is the structure of the Republic of Korea. Of course, the powers of the Prime Minister is limited. What eventually happened in 1981, when the Prime Minister is separated from the President, I was nominated to be Prime Minister and elected by the Batasan. Then my basic responsibility is to head the cabinet and be able to present to the Batasan the program of government, present the budget, and defend it and be subject to question hour. In effect, in a corporate setup, you are just like the COO.
COO. So you were the COO.
Yeah,
Okay.
the president is the CEO.
Would you say that actually President Marcos short-circuited that, even going into the parliamentary or semi-parliamentary system? Was it
Well-
really just a presidential system?
There are provisions there that majority of the cabinet must come from the elected representatives. It is a unicameral system. He did not like district politics because he said that when you become a district congressman, your concerns are too narrow. That is why during the first election of the interim Batasan Pambansa, it became you are a representative of a region. Because he was saying, as a lawmaker, you have to understand many different problems.
Yes. Maybe a federal system would have addressed that as
Well, the federal system was very much introduced during the time that there was a constitutional consultation under President Arroyo. And they were recommending 11 states. To my mind, there are only 4 regions that could be self-sustaining states. Because the fiscal side of a federal system is quite difficult. If they would like really a federal system and they would like to test it, probably there should only be 3 states, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, to try out.
Perhaps. Orion, what's your take on that Marcos experience? I mean, we complain or we rant that we should have a parliamentary system, but we've never really had it. But if you were to follow the stories of Prime Minister Virata, it seems that you had features of it already.
I would say that using a semi-presidential system like what was used
Yes.
during that time is a good transition
Yes.
towards a parliamentary system. If for a long time there hasn't been any experience in real parliamentary style government.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that could help is if we also change the layout of the batasan or of Congress, because right now what's happening, just simple physical layout, everyone is facing front, which is like a classroom.
Yes.
In parliamentary systems around the world, either they are under the Westminster system, opposition and government are facing each other, or in some other systems they are in a semicircular or a U-shaped layout. There is either a debate or a discussion, unlike in the current system where everyone is facing front like a classroom. You don't get much of that, actually.
When we come back, we'll talk more about the semi-presidential system and various options that may be open to us. Stay with us. Welcome back to Political Capital. So the president spoke of the French model, and he said that we should have a president. If we were to quote him. So he seems to be attracted to the idea that you have to have a popularly elected president. Is that really the ideal situation or ideal design for a good system of governance in the Philippines?
Well, based on the research, really, it's really a full parliamentary system that is the ideal endpoint. So what we should really go for is a real, UK-style Westminster system, where the Prime Minister is the real decision maker and the President or whoever is the head of state will be a ceremonial figure, a unifying ceremonial figure. Singapore actually has a system. They amended their constitution to actually allow for the President of the Republic of Singapore to be elected at large. And he now has a lot of reserve powers. He comes in, steps in at certain points, but is still very much a ceremonial figure. And I think that's what we should go for.
Okay. Now, there's an important, dichotomy between the state and the government. Educate us a little bit on, because maybe most people think
They're
it's
the same.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, so this distinction is actually something that people who grow up in a parliamentary system are very conscious about. So state basically talks about everybody. So the head of state, in their case, they have the queen, who is purely ceremonial.
Yes.
She takes care of everyone, regardless of their political beliefs, what their partisan standing is. And The government, on the other hand, has a specific direction of policies. So it is perfectly possible for people to identify with the state and identify with the head of state,
Yes.
either the ceremonial monarch or ceremonial president, but disagree with their prime minister and the party that's handling the country at that time.
Okay, so it might make sense actually to popularly elect your president, but with him basically, him or her, basically sitting as the head of state
Yes.
without, too specific powers.
Yes.
And leaving, I guess, the management of government to the prime minister
Yes.
and the cabinet.
I guess President Duterte, being a strong, a very competent president, can kind of mentor the people who will be the vanguards within the parliament to be.
Okay.
By the time he's done with his term or he's ready to go, he'll basically say, okay, now I've taught you, kayo nang bahala.
Sir, with your breadth of experience and knowing maybe the psyche of the Filipino through how many presidencies, no? I think about corporate systems, no? If Philippines were really a Philippines Inc., shouldn't the selection of your management be more like a parliamentary system?
Yes, that is right. It looked like a parliamentary system is the best type of government.
Yes.
Because it is very similar to a corporate situation.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that demands action.
Yes.
And in a parliamentary system, it is majority rules.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like, stockholders?
Stockholders,
Yeah.
yes.
Will elect its cabinet, which is the
Yeah,
board of directors.
yeah, that's right.
And then the president
Yeah,
or CEO.
and for example, in a parliamentary system, you have a program of government that you sell to the public, and if you are voted in, you have to implement that.
Yes.
You cannot dilly-dally because you're given the power. That is why, in the budget presentation, imagine, in the case of the UK, the Chancellor of the Exchequer merely reads the budget message,
Yes.
and it is already enacted.
Right. And that's where the legislature actually works together on the budget. So you don't have this whole pork
Pork barrel.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
this whole
you
pork
don't have that.
situation, no?
Unlike here, you can debate in 6 months' time about the budget.
Yes.
And then if it is implemented late, then you have the rainy season and you cannot implement the budget well.
What about the geography? I'm thinking about representation. No? Do we stick to congressional districts, or is there a better way of selecting your MPs in a way that you really represent
Well, I
the
think
regions
it
and
will
the people?
improve the selection because they are possible cabinet members.
Okay.
Yes.
You can't just elect any.
You cannot just elect just because he is the son of,
Yes,
the
yes.
wife of. So a party,
Yes.
including the opposition, will select the best people to represent them.
Okay. Now, Orion, we hear all kinds of, the moment you come up with a good idea like parliamentary shift, you have all these naysayers. How do you counter this, this saying that if you leave it to a parliament, you know how congressmen are, you know how senators are. But is it a chicken and egg
Okay,
thing? No?
well, first of all, I would say that the problem of the Philippines, or of many Filipinos, is that we're way too enamored with Hollywood. There are so many of these movies that glorify the president of the U.S. such that we want to have a president like that
Like
as
that
well.
As well, yeah.
So that's the unfortunate thing. Now, with the naysayers saying that, oh, congressmen are going to be like this and like that, having a parliamentary system means giving not just legislative duties to the members of parliament, but also executive responsibilities.
Yes.
People who know that they are totally incapable of fulfilling these kinds of executive duties, there's going to be an added workload, and there's not going to be any pork barrel anymore. The people who are actually incompetent will decide, ay, hindi na lang ako sasali. I won't join because when I get there and then I'm given all these extra responsibilities with no extra funding,
Yes.
and extra incentives, I might actually find myself failing.
For example, in the Batasan before, we have cabinet bills.
Yes.
Those are sponsored by members of the cabinet. And one thing good with the cabinet-sponsored bills is that they know how to implement it.
If you think about it, no, a lot of the legislative agenda sometimes is just about renaming streets, choosing who's going to be the national bird or the national dog or whatever, you know. But if you give Parliament or the legislature executive responsibilities and duties, then they become more in tune with problem solving, looking for, you know, how do we solve all these other problems, and then they start focusing more on these, and you have less of this crazy stuff happening.
For example, many of the laws now have no IRR. It takes years
Yes.
because the viewpoint of the legislative and the implementers are so different that they don't implement the law.
You know, dive a little deeper into the parliamentary system. When we come back, okay, are Filipinos ready for a drastic shift in leadership roles? Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still with Political Capital with our special guests, former Prime Minister Cesar Virata and my friend Orion Perez Dumdum. Gentlemen, let's now look at the economic impact of a parliamentary or semi-presidential system. No? And also, let's take note of the fact that inclusion seems to be, my impression is being taken more seriously in this administration.
When we do a ranking of all the different countries in the world, according to many different indices, GDP per capita, which are the least corrupt countries in the world, which one is the best in terms of ease of doing business, these kinds of things, majority of them are parliamentary systems. And when you see one outlier that is not a parliamentary system, it's a presidential system, you will see the US, and it's not even on top. It's like maybe out of the 30, it's probably number 21.
Yes.
You know, that's the US.
It's largely actually inefficient.
It's actually an inefficient system,
Okay.
you know. So one reason why the economic impact will be better is because the parliamentary system emphasizes competence of the leaders. Because of the way the parliamentary system works, where you need basically collegial discussions.
Okay.
You get inputs from all the different areas, all the representatives from the different areas before you make a decision. So you have this inclusion, you have this information of what is best for most people.
Okay. Now, Orion, you're an IT specialist,
Yes.
and we were chatting about systems design.
Yes.
So in terms of systems design, actually, parliamentary system is better.
It's really better. And comparing presidential and parliamentary, I see that the parliamentary system is a very efficient design in terms of disaster recovery. You know, there's always, you know, there's redundancy. You cannot, if someone has to be removed or someone falls ill, there's always someone ready to replace.
It just moves faster.
It moves
and
faster.
more effectively.
Yes.
PM, you know, I think we have dinners every month talking about the economy and how we can actually improve the lot of the people. How do you think the systems change can help, you know, finally sort of breaking this malaise in our our economy?
When you have a parliamentary system, you have to propose a program of government.
Okay.
Secondly, you have to support that with a budget. And if you can implement that as soon as it is passed, because majority rules, then you become more efficient.
Yeah.
For example, in our experience before, by September 15, we are through with the budget. Then we announce the projects, invite contractors and whatnot so that they can be ready for mobilization.
Yes.
We bid it, and by December, everything is set for implementation January 2nd.
Wow.
And we hit the dry season, the summer season, where you can efficiently implement projects.
Let's say we do make this important decision. Let's go for the parliamentary system. Do you think the benefits are going to outweigh the cost? You know, there's also a cost of change, cost of restructuring.
I think semi-parliamentary or semi-presidential will entail very little costs.
Okay. You're talking about transition, no?
Yes,
Yeah.
there will be a transition.
Yeah.
There will be transition, but I think it is minimal. We set up the DAP for training of permanent secretaries.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
Because right now they're all
But
removed.
we don't have permanent secretaries. Yeah.
We don't have permanent secretaries. And we wanted permanent secretaries that can be transferred from one department to the other. Multiple skilled.
Okay.
So that they have
Yes.
institutional memory.
We had President Ramos here last year, no? And one of the important things he said, no, in the course of our conversation was he actually promotes the shift to parliamentary system, and that because it gives a chance to young and effective people who wouldn't otherwise be able to be elected in a presidential system. So, in other words, it harkens to inclusion. But on the other hand, you have these people being enamored with the idea of, I put in a vote for whoever is going to be the president. So how do we now deal with that, I guess, that shift?
First of all, I think that's where we do a re-education of the people. So, so I've set up a website, thecorrectphilippines.org, which basically tries to tell more and more Filipinos using social media and the internet to get them to understand how a parliamentary system works. Because I guess the biggest problem before was that many people didn't understand it. So that's why they went against it.
Something I keep hearing over and over, whatever good proposals being put in terms of reform, people always say, the knee-jerk reaction, or maybe these are just really chronic naysayers or serial naysayers, is we're not ready for it. Okay. So the question for you two gentlemen is, are we ready for a parliamentary system? Sir?
Well, I believe so.
Okay.
I'd say we've always been ready. Actually, from the very beginning, when we started having, when the founding fathers of the Philippines, the first Philippine Republic, when they decided to come up with a system, the Malolos Republic was actually designed as a parliamentary system.
Yes.
Again, we mentioned this earlier, the layout is very important. And I think this is also how we will end up developing real party delineation.
PM Virata, let's, what's your parting shot before we go?
Well, I hope we go through with this constitutional change.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it was great. I think this is one of my favorite topics. I mean, on this show, and so thank you for the very engaging conversation. Filipinos will have to retool the way they think of their leaders. For more than a century, Filipinos have turned to a single person, a president they had chosen themselves. Perhaps it is time to finally change the way we view our leaders, as well as the way we choose them. Effectiveness over popularity, progress over gridlock, inclusion over exclusion. This is Tony Abad for Political Capital. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week.